The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Good afternoon, good day. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls, and we're coming to you live from the Morris Media Studios right here in Leimert Park in South Los Angeles. And very excited to be here today. We're going to be tackling a very, very important topic, issue, challenge in the black community. And we're not going to just talk about how this impacts the African American community, but also how it impacts black immigrants. And so we're going to find that intersection, today as we, really look into this very, very urgent, important, significant, issue that we are facing, in the black community, and that is around mental health or mental wellness. Here at Faith Without Borders, we seek to examine in thought-provoking ways, some of the issues that we are facing, in our communities, both in the United States and around the world, and to see how we can have solutions-driven dialogue around it, so that this can be not just informational, but educational and transformational. And so we're very, very excited, about what we're going to be in conversation about today, and looking forward to how this will move us, towards, pro-action, towards action, that can be preventative, action that can be, interventive, as well as action that can, bring about the necessary changes in attitudes and actions around the challenge of mental health and wellness. May is designated as Mental Health Month, where we seek to bring awareness, to that issue. And the individuals, and families that are affected by it. And I want to just say at the outset that our goal is to see how we can move us through information from stigmatization to compassion. That's what our sisters and brothers need who are challenged with, any, kind of, mental illness, for them to know that they are still part of our families, part of our communities, most of all, that God still loves them. So that's what it's about. And today, I'm joined by two colleagues and sisters who are at the forefront, around facilitating and bringing, mental, health and mental wellness strategies to so many, our communities here, in the southern Los Angeles area. And so I want to introduce you to them, and then we're going to dig right into, this provocative, conversation, as well as solutions-driven one. So I want to introduce to you first my sister, Dr. Melissa Shepard-Williams. Did I say it right?
Yes.
Dr. Melissa Shepard-Williams is here with us, as well as Senait Adamassu. All right, I said it right. There we go. So good to have them here, and looking forward to their thoughts and the work that they are doing, and hope that this will be helpful to all of us, empowering to all of us as we continue our work together. I'm going to start with Melissa. If you can just maybe share with us a little bit about, when you hear, a Mental Health Awareness Month, as a therapist, and you can tell us what you're doing first. What does that conjure up, in your mind around what you're doing, who you are, and what you seek to achieve?
Well, firstly, thank you, Pastor Sauls, for inviting me to be part of this conversation. It's such an essential one to have, so I'm thankful that you are setting up a platform for it. And that is linked to why this month is important. This month and every month, but because this month is one that serves to highlight the importance of mental health awareness, it means to me a lot, because one of the things that I'm passionate about as a therapist and an ongoing learner about our history, world history, is that if we don't dedicate time and energy to learning about our history, frozen pain will stay as such, frozen pain. And trauma is real. And it's very important that we continue spreading awareness, increasing education about not only mental health, but our history overall, so that we can have a clear idea of why we are suffering. And what resources we already have within for the healing. Build on what we've already been doing and fine-tuning with greater awareness. So, as a Panamanian woman with roots in different islands, there are a lot of histories to bring together for me personally, and I'm still learning. I've been here in the U.S. now 33 years. I can't believe how time flies. And of the 33, over 20, I've been in this field of work. And I'm so excited because there's so much to learn. That's what keeps it very interesting to me.
Great.
Yeah.
Tell us, what do you do?
Well, I'm a psychotherapist, and I am in private practice. I'm also a psychotherapist at California Institute of the Arts. Now more universities have therapists available for the students. It's such a critical period of life. And I also teach in the Cultural Family Psychology program at Pacific Oaks College, and this is for clinicians in training. And it's a campus that's very focused on social justice and heightened awareness about cultural history, which is very tied into one of my most important experiences of community service as one of the founding members of the International Society of Black Latinos. We're close to 10 years navigating this water, and our main goal is to bring communities together through education, and we do so through the arts, using the arts, so that the cultural celebration really is moved by the arts. And if we're going to talk about our pain histories, I'm learning that it is really, well, this is my bias, I should say. It feels to me impossible to learn about pain stories without the arts. That's where the information is. Not only about what happened, what is happening, and how we're healing. It's in the arts.
Yeah, certainly the arts play a very, very important role in therapy, and so it's good to hear that that's an integral part of how you seek to approach it.
Yes.
And I have to say that the International Society of Black Latinos is one of my favorite organizations. We partner together in so many ways.
Yes.
To try and see how we can create a sense of belonging. For a lot of our Black Latinos, as they find themselves at the intersection, here in the United States, and you and the leadership team there, y'all are doing a great job, around creating that sense of belonging that is so empowering, especially around this frozen pain, that you mentioned earlier. We're going to get back to that a little later on around that. Senait, so good to have you here. This is my sister from Ethiopia, one of my favorite countries that I've visited several times. And tell us a little bit about what you are doing, and then I'll share a little bit about how we met and how we connect. But it's so good to have you here, and really appreciate the work that you are doing. You and the coalition. But tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and the coalition.
First, I also thank you so much for being a voice for immigrants, predominantly for the social, political, and of course health issues. Since I know you how many years ago, and thank you for being with us. I'm so proud and honored to be with you. Mainly, the Morris Media has been a voice for us for how many months and how many years since they started. So I'm really blessed. Like we are in the middle of the murder part, whereas blackness with belonging to start.
Yeah.
So my name is Senait. I am the executive director of African Communities Public Health Coalition. And that's a nonprofit organization located not too far from here in Stalker. We were founded in response to mental health issue in African immigrants. Mainly at that time was suicide rate was high among different communities of Black immigrants. Right now, this is very important. Mental health has been a major issue for immigrants. The pre- and post-migration trauma, as you said earlier, which never been resolved, yet we still have to come to take the acculturation before we resolve our own issue. So it's been difficult, and also the cultural gap, there's no bridge. So people tend to resist, or stigma has been the barrier to come forward to receive the services. So knowing that, as professionally I'm a clinician as well, knowing that's a barrier for our communities, we gathered together and created this organization that addresses the issue of mental health and immigration issue among our community. So right now we do so many different programs. We have direct mental health services, which means we have African-centered clinicians, case managers who address the issue over 10 different African languages. And we also have outreach and education. That's the significant or the signature program we have, raising awareness what's going on among our community. I mean, as you know, mental health, it doesn't have to be severe disorder. Mental health, we have a common mental health among us, anxiety, stress, and depression, all that. We don't have to pathologize or symptoms to be mental health. That's all the stigma not coming forward to get services. So this organization has been really, really empowering our community, mainly in West Africa, and it's not like the regular traditional services. We must go talk the language. We must go address the issue from their perspective, the cultural perspective, if that's what it takes, and that's what it's going to take. So we created this holistic treatment by going to the churches, mosque, you name it, social gatherings, to break the ice and take out the barriers. So that's what we've been doing. The outcomes is great, and for the last 9 years, we've been working with the Department of Mental Health. We contracted. So we have done about 5, 6, I think 7 projects so far. It's been very successful, and currently we have one really unique program, which we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. But I really like the fact, although mental health has to be ongoing process, it has to be educated, the community has to be address these issues, ongoing process, but just to designate this May is great. It will give, I don't know if you know, there's We Rise, as a Department of Mental Health sponsored. That's been a really great success since last year was the first, and this is the second year. Every other community has to use as an excuse mental health month. So I'm really appreciative. We also have July, we're going to be the Black Baby Moore Campbell. That's also designated as mental health awareness rate. So, as I said, I'm so glad to be here, but it has to be everyday thing to raise awareness of what needs to be done. Mainly for the youth, we start losing our youth due to the cultural barrier. There's no bridging the gap. So we're here just as much as we can try to help together.
Well, the coalition is doing an awesome job, and I'm glad to have been a part of it and to be supportive of it, especially from a faith-based perspective, but also from a perspective of a black immigrant from South Africa, and the need for culturally appropriate diagnosis, treatment, around it, and so this issue of cultural competency when it comes to therapy, therapists, and how we respond, not just to the African American community but also black immigrants, is critical, around this. So, so Melissa, can you talk a little bit about just the importance? And you mentioned the term, frozen pain.
Yes.
It just means that a person has to have the necessary cultural competency to be able to, to kind of figure out a way to break down that pain, to penetrate it, if you will, before this jumping, to a diagnosis or just jumping to, any, kind of, prescription or whatever folk, need to take. Can you talk a little bit about just the importance, as, a black therapist around, cultural competency when it comes to, taking care, of the mental health, of black folks?
Sure. Frozen pain, what I'm learning about it is that it's the result of being unaware of the different factors that come together to keep us stuck. And so it's frozen. The pain is there, and we are just sleepwalking through life, if you will, until we really learn about what are the layers of this pain and how I'm just surviving rather than thriving. Doing the best that one can, and the body is amazing. I mean, it is the repository of all our experience, the pleasure ones and the painful ones. And yet it's also equipped to keep us surviving. And until we receive the support, and we all need it, until we receive the support necessary that's culturally informed, then we'll stay there. Thriving is not going to happen. So from the helping professional standpoint, and I use that term to invite all of us, not us therapists only, but all of us that in some way are in a helping profession. It's important to stay humble, to not think that one day at 5:30 we're going to know all that there is to be known about working with someone of African ancestry, because there's always more to learn, and each person's story is unique. It's a unique narrative. And even if for example, if I'm meeting with another woman who happens to identify as Afro-Latina, as I do, I would do a disservice to her if I assume that our points connect everywhere. I need to hear her story of pain, and I need to stay open so that I become more culturally informed, how she sees it through her eyes. And, it deepens empathy. And in deepening empathy in this dance, then the person may feel more invited to share more, to go inside even deeply to places they may not have gone to before. And so the frozen pain can gradually melt. But I'm oversimplifying,
Right.
It's such a process of learning, and it goes in both directions.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it probably is, how all of this connects with intergenerational trauma, right?
Yes.
Or in some cases, transnational trauma.
Yes.
Right? So, as a person born and raised in South Africa, and one who, after 25 plus years of, apartheid being gone, I'm still dealing, with what I call post-traumatic apartheid syndrome. So I come to the United States, and get to know and understand, the experience of othering in this country of African Americans, and then, learn about, what later on became known as post-slavery, syndrome. And so you have this not just intergenerational trauma because of frozen pain, but you also have this national trauma that comes together, around that. So, I mean, how do we, at least just figure out a way to acknowledge that, as we try to sift through the maze, of the appropriate, or the necessary, therapeutic, opportunities that folk need, around us. And any thoughts about how do we, attempt at trying to figure it out, beginning with acknowledging it?
Many thoughts. and I'm learning. And I feel that at the core of it is expanding education about our history. We must learn about our history so that we become more aware of what you just said, post-traumatic slave syndrome, as an example, so that we understand why we interpret the world around us the way we do, why we interpret the world inside us the way we do. Why do I talk to myself the way I do about what's happening in my life? And how does that influence the choices that I make? If we don't learn about history, we will be blind to how we move in the world.
Yeah.
And it creates conflicts in relationships. It sets the tone for depression, anxiety, all these different things that are happening in our lives, including the pain of immigration. And so education is at the core of it. For those of us who happen to be helping professionals, I feel that we have a duty, really a responsibility to reach out to communities. We don't have to wait until somebody on their own becomes more trusting of the institutions we represent. We need to engage, in the way that your coalition does it. Engage with the community so that trust is built. And so people feel like they can take that initiative and reach out for help, because now they understand better what mental health means. It doesn't mean I'm crazy, that taboo.
Right.
And so people may feel more inclined to reach out and seek help, not only of therapists, but other community helpers.
Yeah.
And the therapists need to engage other community helpers. The treatment needs to be comprehensive. It can't be just the two of us in the room.
Right.
There's got to be more.
Yeah.
There's got to be more.
You mentioned it has to be comprehensive, and it has to be communal.
Yes.
In some ways, and that's why if stigma continues to be a barrier, if judgment continues to be a barrier, it then breaks down that communal responsibility that we all have around contributing to the mental health of one another. Senait, you mentioned part of the work of the coalition has been these different programs, and part of the programs has been to try and facilitate therapy and treatment that is culturally appropriate around. You want to say a little bit more about how you all approach that?
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what she said also. We have to look at it from two different perspectives, in my way. This intergenerational trauma is, as a community in large, we have to teach, as you said, who we are as an identity and why the way we act and why the way we feel. That's it. But the second one would be individual therapy. We have to work from a strength base. Means especially for immigrant, when we focus, like we have so much strength than weaknesses. But we don't know because we don't know. Nobody told us. We're trying to fit the so-called American dream. That's why we get lost in between, because there's no acculturation process that would give us an idea what it means. We don't know how to access the social services. We don't know how to, any sectors, education system, all that is becoming, and then pre and post, what I say pre and post is pre, as you said, you have experiences with South African issue, experiences with conflict, the civil war. All of us come with different trauma, which broken to trust our government, any public entity or the government entity, that trust is broken already. Even the process going through immigration to come to America, it's a huge trauma. So when we come here, we have no connection whatsoever, any public officials or system like police, any other government entity, and that's what the problem is. So we're trying to, instead of bringing on strength, what we have when we came here, but we tend to minimize our potential and just dealing day-to-day stressors for ourselves, and that's a big problem. So we really, as a therapist, we have to acknowledge what the strength we have. We have to acknowledge what the tradition where we came from, and also what we're accustomed to. And but as you say, the acculturation is a huge process. So culturally appropriate and linguistically appropriate is very the key component of the therapies. Not only that, I remember 2013-14, what we did was sponsored by Department of Mental Health again. We provided how to treat clients, immigrants, communities from the cultural perspective. Because if I say something, even within the African continent, even with the Caribbean, there's a uniqueness, there's a misunderstanding among each other. You're from South Africa, I'm from Ethiopia. I'm sure there is a way how to approach things and differently. That's the little things what it makes us who we are as a person. When we don't have that, that's what's broken and leading to mental illness. So for us, what the first thing we have developed was curriculum. Curriculum, what means is they've done quite a study among different communities and African communities, and so we formulate that, what it means from each culture perspective, what mental health means, what is the taboo as mental health each communities, and what is a prevention or intervention. Right. So we collaborate with faith-based groups, because in Africa, I'm sure in the Caribbean, the first thing what we do is when we deal with the stress, we go to the faith-based leaders. I'm sure you experience. So that's a tool. That's what it takes. We don't have to always diagnosis for this brain disease and you have this and that. We work together, but our major signature program, I would say, is addressing the issue of mental illness from cultural perspective. Yeah. What is culture means, and what does that mean to the person who's suffering mental illness? So we've been doing that. That's by advocating in behalf of that client, and also reaching out as a community-based organization that provides us any prevention and intervention. That's what we've been doing.
Yeah, and we just want to let folk know that any diagnosis is not a dead end, right? It is a detour for you to seek out help, and later on we'll talk about bridges in the community to facilitate a path to help, a path to health, and a path to wellness and one to wholeness. So again, a diagnosis is not a dead end. It is just a detour, and our hope is that we can provide some resources for folk to get the help that they need to get back on track, and then to continue their purpose in life, and unleashing their power in life as they continue to live. So that's essential around that. We know that mental illness manifests itself in so many different ways, and one that's probably it's very, very prominent, but sometimes very, very misunderstood, is around depression. So Melissa, can you maybe say a little bit about that? What is it? What are the symptoms? knowing again that it's not a dead end. That diagnosis is just a detour.
Yes.
Around that. Any thoughts, from you around the depression piece?
Okay. Well, they are, according to, the manual that supposedly guides our diagnosing process, criteria that determine that depression is present. Among the criteria is a really low mood for at least 2 weeks. There's a timeline. There's another kind of depression where it can last years. A low-grade depression, as it's referred to frequently. But they have in common definitely that mood, low appetite or increasing appetite, oversleeping or undersleeping, irritability. These are things that are very common within that experience of depression. Suicidal thoughts, not necessarily accompanied by plans, but the thoughts may be there. In children, there are certain other variations. But I want to always be mindful that even though these are the things that we are trained to keep in mind when we're diagnosing, at the table where these criteria are put together and made to be a book, there need to be more anthropologists at that table so that it is way more culturally informed. What may look pathological to someone based on what they're reading may not fit what happens in this culture, a particular culture, when this particular mood is in progress. So I'm not married to the book, is what I'm trying to say. I know that we definitely are guided by it, but like you, I just feel that we must focus mainly on cultural expressions. What are the words that people use to describe what's going on? You mentioned anxiety. You hear Spanish-speaking people say things like susto. That's not in that book. Things like that we need to be very mindful of. These little details. Language is powerful.
Yeah. When those symptoms manifest itself, what are some recommendations that you have for family, for friends, around, how to be able to support this person, to be able to guide them, if needed. What power do we have in terms of, helping a sister, helping a brother, a family member, a friend, a colleague, once we begin to just notice some of these symptoms?
I think that's an interesting question. I feel that it's a layered one because we might be in the presence of someone that needs help, but if we may be needing the same help and don't know how to help ourselves, trouble. So coming from the place of assuming that we know that help is out there, I would say let's increase our awareness about what resources are available, and not just therapists, so that at least one step is taken towards connection with someone else who can be a listening ear, someone that can be trusted. We're social beings. There are certain things that we simply cannot and should not do alone. Healing is one of them. Some things, yes, we go inside, and when we go inside informed, then we can better move forward. So I would say let's make ourselves aware of what resources are available. I know that part of the challenge, and that's why I'm thankful that your organization exists, part of the challenge is that if, and also immigrants, if these institutions are associated with the oppressor, our folks are not going over there. And that is the reason why we need to continue this effort of community building, of bridge building, so that we can help another that is needing support, because we've already connected with community leaders. It could be faith-based. It does not have to be, but the variety of support resources that can be in a community that can eventually lead to a therapist. It doesn't have to only be a therapist.
Right. I agree with you.
Yeah. You know? But the thing is connection. Connection. We cannot help another if we ourselves don't feel connected.
Senait?
Well, again, she's absolutely right. One of the issue with the stigma is even to say, I'm going to send you to a therapist. Therapist, the name of the therapist becoming stigma. Oh, you're mental. You're crazy. I'm not sick. I'm not mental. What do I have to see the therapist? Right. Even couples, when you tell them, like, you have to go to the therapist, that's a big thing, right? So that's why we're trying to reduce that stigma. I used to have a teacher that is better than who have one good friend than any psychotropic medication. That's
Amen.
True. It is true. So if you have good, family members, someone, that's the first thing that has to step. The only thing I have to say, we have to accept who we are as a person before we judge. And I think in our immigrant communities, mainly my experience, mainly when it comes to the youth, I think there is a culturation process that's been hard, because what the family see that young men and women going through the process or mood change and mood swings, stuff like that, they assume, this is trying to be American now, you don't listen to me. So they want it to be validated by their children. They act like someone Ethiopian or South African, whoever might be the background. They underestimate the children's problem, what they're going through. Yet those youth going through school, they have to fit these two cultures in between. When they go outside, there's another world. As you say, there's the systemic problem is out there. The immigrants, they might have accent or not, at least the parents. And also there's a systemic problem, that discrimination. They're black, right? So those are the things they have to face, and they don't know how to survive in there. When they come home, they have to be that African culture, respect and eat the way I talk to you, the way I treat, all that. So it's a pressure going on without acknowledging what's going on among those youth. So I really highly suggest it first and just accept those kids or adults as they are, and just validate the feelings where they are. And then, as you said, and the second thing I think we need to be doing, all more prevention factor, is train more people in the community, including faith-based leaders and community leaders, that acknowledging the symptoms. What does it take to the next level? That's what we need to do, really. Yeah. Otherwise, we just go in a circle. This is what's going on. The current mental health service, $1 billion is invested, and we're trying to say no. We want it to be treated the way we want it to be. We have the uniqueness. You don't understand our culture. And then it's for us, or the burden, to teach those service providers. They will never understand unless we go reach them, teach them how to be treated. They want us to be treated. So yes, I think the first thing is the family friend will help. Just validate whoever's going a process or who are going through those moments. And the second would be just, if it depends the severity of the symptoms, and then seek to get professional help.
Yeah, and our hope is that, that we create such a healthy sense of belonging, that a person's diagnosis doesn't have to result, in discrimination, nor, in shame around it. So that we can create, safe spaces where folk can be, true to what they are experiencing and what they are going through, as we look at this and as we continue to make our way, through it. I mean, what we want to try and say to people is, look, when you receive a diagnosis, you don't have to become that. but we are here to help you overcome it. And that you are not alone. In this. We're going to take about a 30-second break, and then we're going to come back on the other side and kind of just continue to explore, issues of colorism, issues around, what does code switching, do, which is what Senait talk about, what a lot of young people, have to do in so many ways, and how do you deal with that, psychologically as you try to be, this or that, for whoever is out there demanding it, from you. And then we'll also look at, some bridges into the community, especially the faith community, which I'm a part of, and how it is essential for us to step up, and become, safe places, places of acceptance and belonging. After all, Scripture teaches us that we ought to, be transformed by the renewing of our minds. If that is not a call to action around our role as the faith community, around mental health and wellness, I don't know what can be. So looking forward to being back again, continue our conversation, around mental health and wellness in the Black community. This has been Faith Without Borders, and we'll be right back.
I'm so sorry.
Welcome back. This is Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. Good to be here. Have some, well qualified and powerful, women in the house. Sharing, the work that they are doing around mental health and wellness. And as I mentioned, before we took a quick break, we want to get into, a few other challenges just kind of hit, some of them. The first one is colorism. Mm-hmm. We know that, is because of the prevalence, and how so many of us have been infected with and affected by white supremacy. Colorism, is a trauma that is a global phenomenon, and contributes in so many ways, to challenges around mental health and wellness. Melissa, you want to say a little bit about,
Sure.
Its impact, and how do we, prevent that, or how do we intervene, in terms of that?
Yes. Colorism, as I'm understanding it, is the result of our people absorbing the faulty beliefs imposed by oppressors about better than. Better than, in this case, what's the color of your skin? Mm-hmm. The closer to white, the better. and then how that impacts your life in many ways. And, sadly, this is still infecting, to use your words, infecting our lives. Mm-hmm. And definitely is one of the many things that influences the experience of depression, conflict between people, mm-hmm. violence between people. Mm-hmm. We ostracize our own people. So then we take on some of the behaviors of who's been oppressing us. And that definitely is an example of intergenerational trauma. So then the pain is moving from one generation to the next. And for as long as we don't become aware of what's, causing us to behave the way we do, we're stuck.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're stuck.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, again, having been born and raised in South Africa, colorism, was huge. That was one of the the pillars of apartheid, and how colorism was then manifested by way of paternalism, in South Africa. So from South Africa to the United States to the Dominican Republic, this whole piece around colorism continues to be a huge, challenge for us as to how we need to, respond to it and how to really embrace who we are as our authentic selves, yes. And not, fall for this whole notion that, lighter is brighter, mm-hmm. And if you're black, get to the back. Mm-hmm. If you're black, get to the back, mm-hmm. Around that. So that's a key piece that many, many times contributes, yes. To, people's, intergenerational trauma, yes. Around that. Senait, you mentioned, with young people, what they're experiencing, at home and what happens at school or out right. there with their peers, not just for African American young people, but also for black immigrant, young people, mm-hmm. And that, of course, touches on the whole piece of code switching, right. Also back in the day known as double consciousness. Mm-hmm. As a black immigrant, I talk about triple consciousness. Because I got to deal with, what white folk try to foist on me, and then what African Americans try to foist on me, and then dealing with the immigrant piece. So double consciousness, triple consciousness, code switching. Any thoughts,
yes,
from you around that?
That's exactly what's going on right now. We've tried to, at first we started with raising awareness among the community at large. What we see is really the major problem with immigrant families. Their children is most of them are really affected by the cultural gap. The mother and the father coming from different background. We are, most of us coming from collective society, which we have to validate our family expectation, all that. Mm-hmm. But mm-hmm. as I said earlier, and you mentioned, and also this youth are pulled in 2 or 3 different ways. When they go to the school, if they were born here, of course, they have to face the same as an African or African American black youth, the discrimination being black. They underestimated their education level. They don't understand, or they're not going to be somewhere. They're not going to be successful. That's one. Mm-hmm. On the opposite, when they come home, no, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be a professor. You're going to be this. Mm-hmm. Those kids don't know which way to go, right? And the same thing goes to the mental health issue and if they experience that stress, feeling down, depression, anxiety. Mainly anxiety I see a lot of with TAY, which is 17 to 24 age. Anxiety from different reasons. And mm-hmm. going to school, the transition from high school to college, all that really affected those behavior. So it's the same thing. The parents tends to not understand what's wrong with him, with her. Mm-hmm. I work so hard to provide it. I'm giving her this. I'm giving her that. Mm-hmm. Yet she's not happy. She's not doing at the class. I want her to college, but she decided not to go. This is the issue. It's not on one person in the family. The whole family could be affected by this behavior. This really, we found like identity formation is a major issue during that transitional age. Mm-hmm. Who am I as a black man? Who am I black young women? Mm-hmm. But again, I'm an immigrant. Do I fit in the other African American culture? Do accept me? Do I have an accent? That's even different issue with myself. So that's the kind of thing that causes mental health issue among youth. We recently have a great project, and last year we started recruited for black immigrants. We started as black immigrants and Caribbeans and African descendants. That's in Puerto Rico, Panamanian, Jamaican, of course, the African continent. We did, but we said when we look at it going around, we find out there's something common among those black youth. Having African American, we have more common differences. So we brought it together, and it's just like, no, we just have to do black youth. And it turned out to be something which I'm so proud to talk about. That is a great experience. What I found out throughout this process is, yes, there is a discrimination, there is identity formation gap, but these youth are brilliant, but they need guidance. They need guidance, so we develop a curriculum. We have storytelling, we have public speaking, basic mental health, and the power of advocacy. Those are the things. Of course, outreach and engagement is the main. I look at them as a storytelling would be a little tool they carry around. They want to do presentation. We gave them the choice which topic to select. Storytelling to come is a therapy, like it's becoming more a treatment session when everybody step up and telling the story. They're not ashamed. They create their own village in a space amazing, and those youth trying to teach other elementary and middle school. Now we're going to the middle school, doing the same thing. I'm so proud. So what it's showing me is not just focusing on discrimination with intergenerational, but we also have to bring their strengths. This is who you are. Do not be determined. That doesn't define who you are as a black man, but you have more identity within yourself. So that's what we're trying to do. So really have to have a lot of work to do with young men and women to empower, to bring the best out of them. And this is one tool we found. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. Mainly faith-based has to work this really, really strongly, because that's why we kind of collect under faith-based for immigrant community. We don't have, per se, this center, that center. We all associated with faith-based organization. So we're trying to work with faith-based organization.
Well, that's a great segue for us, because again, we want to be supportive of that, and hopefully at some point in the future we can have some of those young people with us so they can talk about their experience and how we can continue to work on this. You mentioned the faith community. The two of you know that I'm big around how the faith community must play a role in every aspect of people's lives. And this show is called Faith Without Borders. And I've named it that because I believe that we serve a God without borders. And because of that, how we practice our faith, can be limitless. It can be borderless, if you will. And so how do we then employ and deploy our faith to see how we can bring about racial equity, the beloved community, as we do the work that we've been called to do. And so the faith community, I believe, can play a tremendous role around how to advance, and facilitate mental health and mental wellness. And I want to, ask the two of you just your thoughts around how you've utilized the faith community. Every congregation I've been a part of, health and wellness has been an integral part of that. In fact, I believe that health education is an integral part of faith formation. It's not separate or apart from it. Those are inextricably linked, in terms of that, because God is concerned about every aspect, of your life. We don't stand before God in various compartments. We stand before God, as a whole, and God is concerned about us, as a whole. And so the faith community can be a very, very important bridge, to mental health and mental wellness around that. I want to lift up and give a shout out to Emmanuel Praise Fellowship, where I had the opportunity to worship with today. They are located in Rancho Cucamonga. Bishop Kelvin Simmons, is the pastor there, and Pastor Maisha, she is, the one that coordinates their health, and wellness ministry. And this entire month, they have, every week they've done something at the church and in worship around educating folk, in terms of, mental health and mental wellness. And when I was there today, I was just so, touched and impressed, around how, we've allowed it to enter into not just the church building, but enter into worship, around how it is that that God, seek to, God desires our wellness, and the church can be a huge advocate in that. So shout out, to Emmanuel Praise Fellowship, Rancho Cucamonga. Y'all are doing a great job, and you blessed me today, as I was part of your worship, and we shared around how to keep our lights on, around that. So if you all just want to share a little bit about, how can, the faith community, churches, mosques, temples, synagogues, play a role, and any other spaces, of worship. How can the faith community play a role around advancing mental health and mental wellness?
I think the faith community can play a very strong role, as we were talking about earlier, especially because our community so frequently are more inclined to reach out to the faith community, if they're going to reach out at all, because in this fear, we want to keep it together. We don't want to let anyone in, and this is part of the taboo. We don't want anybody to think we're crazy. We don't want anybody to know our business, and so that's how we don't let help in. But if we let it in at all, it tends to be from faith communities, and so that's how they continue to play a strong role. I think it would be helpful for the different faith communities to become more aware of the different ways in which pain manifests, so that we can work conjointly. As a clinician, I can say that when I'm in therapy with someone, I feel that it's extremely important to allow that into the conversation. It's important to know, where the person gets their strength from. What's serving as an anchor. And so it's a central piece in the work that we do. And that's where the comprehensive piece comes in. Sometimes we talk about their own experience at home, how they practice their faith. We discuss that in therapy.
Right.
Very important. I would like to add, and this is to piggyback on what you were sharing earlier, when the International Society of Black Latinos goes to schools and universities and businesses and wherever they welcome us to present a workshop about our culture, which ends up being an open door to talk about human relations in general, not only the Black Latino experience. When we meet with youngsters and we're in small group conversations or large group conversations, that's where they open up about their pains, about their struggles that maybe they're not discussing at home. And this is a way of raising awareness, not only about what's difficult, but what are your strengths? What are your anchors? And the conversation about faith can be one of those pieces of the conversation. What serves as an anchor to you? So that we go from a strength-based platform.
Right. So now you want to share some closing words?
Right. Yeah. My personal experience is spirituality is a big part of me. I came from a Christian background, but I found like all human is equal under the God's eyes. So we serving human. Human is human. It don't matter which religion you practice or what color or background you came. So the spirituality and the faith organization is the tools, because traditionally for Africans, regardless you're Muslim, Christian, whatever, the first thing you have to go help is faith. The faith-based organization, Press, you know it, right? That's what we disclose our problem. That comes not per se that priest or the imam would do something, but we're feeling like we are connection and a high power, which is God. So believing in that, spirituality is main component within the mental health perspective. And as African Coalition is one of the things we're working on is with imams. We have a great mosques, 2 or 3 at least, West Africans, for the Muslims, and part of my coalition board members are very active Muslims, so they're really getting us to their community. So there's no boundaries. We go anytime. We celebrate last year Eid with 300 people among Christians and Muslims. We're going to do it, by the way, June 6th, June 8th this year, Eid in the park, Torrance Park. Please make a note. So what I'm saying is spirituality is very important. When we say spirituality, is all faith-based organization as our partners. So we're in the process building that component, not only mental health therapists per se or med support. Spirituality is mainly for immigrant population. That's who we are. That's what we hold on. Regardless, politically, socially, anything, it goes from up to down, right? So we're going to have a session for spirituality or the faith-based, whoever. So we're working with imams and priests who are willing to come to our center, give that component of treatment. This is going to be one of our treatments. That's where we are as a whole. So it's very important. I'm looking forward to working with you, other faith-based organization, because that is needed. That's who we are as a person. My personal journey is, if it wasn't God, there's no way I can do this work.
Yes. This has been such a great conversation, and so grateful for Melissa, who was here with us, Panama in the house, as well as Senait, Ethiopia in the house, and South Africa in the house. And so as black immigrants who have made it a point to be part of the black community in the United States, because, of our intersectional lives, and our commitment to contribute to our mutual liberation, as we seek to pursue mental health and mental wellness. This has been, great, to be, with you all once again here on Faith Without Borders. And let me close with this for each one of you. This is, from Scripture, 3 John 1 verse 2, and it simply says the following. My brother, my sister, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. This is our prayer for each one of you, and we hope that today's program will contribute to your wellness, to your health, because after all, mental health is your health, and so let's continue to walk and work together towards the health and wellness that God has for us. This has been Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. We'll see you next time.